I'd like to welcome the members of the public and the staff to this meeting. We've already started the day with a karakia, so we'll move on to item 2, apologies. There are no apologies, so we'll move on to item 3, conflicts of interest. Given my business interests in Taupō Airport, I've decided to abstain from that part of the discussions during item 6.3, appointment of external representatives to council committees on appointing the business representatives to the Taupō Airport Authority Committee. Are there any other conflicts of interest? That being the case, we'll move on to item 4.1, confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of December 2025. Recommendation that minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday the 16th be approved and adopted as a true and correct record. Can we have a mover for that?
Happy to
Kylie,
move.
thank you. A seconder, Councillor Cameron. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Public forum. Public forums are put aside for the purpose of public input and are designed to enable members of the public to bring matters of their choice, not necessarily on the meeting's agenda, to the attention of the local authority. No requests from members of the public have been received. However, Councillor Campbell has requested to present during the public forum, which the Deputy Mayor, who was acting Mayor at the time, has declined, as it doesn't meet the purpose of the public forum under clause 15 of the standing orders, and is inappropriate for public forum to be used as a platform for elected members to address the council. For the benefit of Councillor Campbell, I, however, am prepared to hear from other members on this matter, and in order to do so, I move the following motion. The council does not proceed with the public forum and therefore does not allow Councillor Campbell to speak, as he is not a member of the public for the purpose of the meeting. I'll just add, he has been offered other alternative times and dates. Do I have a seconder for the motion?
A point of order, Your Worship. I just wish to point out to members of the public that you have refused my application to present for 5 minutes during this public forum, and that you are in breach of Taupō District Council Standing Orders 15.2, which gives very little discretion for refusal, and none of which apply to me. Indeed, the only justification I have received from both yourself and the Deputy Mayor is all about your idea of proper decorum. So at Taupō District Council, it can only be concluded that we have the outrageous situation whereby members of the public have greater freedom of speech than the elected members voted in every 3 years to speak on their behalf. Your Worship, do you actually recognise that?
Councillor, I just draw your attention to standing orders in section 26.2. Could you clarify your point of order? Thank you.
So is that a question for me?
Yes.
Or standing orders 15.2, I'll read it out if you like. Restrictions. No, I don't have reference to 26.2. I'm reading for 15.2, which is restrictions on the public forum. The chairperson has the discretion to decline a speaker or to terminate a presentation at any time where, and there's six reasons here, which I say none of which apply to me, a speaker is repeating views repeated by an earlier speaker at the same public forum. No. The speaker is criticising elected members and or staff. Well, you haven't heard me, so you can't really say no to that. The speaker is being repetitious, disrespectful of offensive, as above. The speaker has previously spoken on the same issue. No, I have not. The matter is subject to legal proceedings. Nope. And lastly, the matter is subject to a hearing, including the hearing of submissions where the local authority or committee sits in a quasi-judicial capacity. None of those apply here. There is no discretion. as far as I can tell, unless you'd like to introduce something I don't know about.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I have moved a motion. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Westerman. So we'll open it up for discussion now. Anyone want to comment on that?
Through the chair, I'm struggling to understand why you're using a public forum to address council versus catching up with us at another nominated time. Is it because it is recorded and it is going out to the public, or is it because you would like to engage with councillors? If it's to engage with councillors, I'd like to suggest that there are better ways of doing that than taking up the public forum time.
Very good questions. Yes, I would like this to be public recorded, and I'm aware those opportunities which have been offered to date were not going to be public recorded, so that is one reason. The second, and I would like the public to hear this actually, in the interest of transparency of how we work around here. And the second question was, okay, I was pressing for some sort of presentation. This is kind of a last resort, so I was pressing to present a 10-minute presentation with slides to council actually before Christmas, and I was actually aiming for the last session of council, and there was actually 90 minutes set aside for this talk on procurement and delegations. Now that opportunity was canned, supposedly because of lack of time, even though I could have presented then, but that was the chair's discretion. I next approached the mayor, early this year to get another opportunity, primarily during today actually, because we had a session this morning, and I wanted to put a time when we were all here rather than all online or something like that. And I still think that actually could have happened earlier today if we'd, even during the lunch break or prior to the session. I made these suggestions, they were declined, and I decided, well, public forum is as good as any. And I wasn't expecting a debate, of course, although with any public forum presentation, the subject to the discretion of the chair, questions can be asked. And I was going to give a fuller presentation next Tuesday. That was, as far as I know, still scheduled in, but it, again, was not going to be recorded for public viewing.
Supplementary to that, I'd be more than happy to hear what you've got to say on a Tuesday morning catch-up, which I think is probably more appropriate than using up time on the public forum.
Well, I mean, we're talking five minutes here, and this one would be recorded for public viewing, so 5 minutes. We'll probably spend 5 minutes. We'll probably spend more than 5 minutes talking about it when I could have just actually presented it.
Christine, Councillor Rankin, sorry.
Councillor Campbell and I had a discussion earlier where I tried to dissuade him from using the public forum because I don't believe it is the appropriate place for this to happen. However, I do believe that if he wants to make, we all should be in the position, and if he wants to make a statement about something in a recorded environment, I'm going to remind us again, we're politicians. We've never played a political game. This is a different council group, and there are a lot of real politicians sitting around here rather than just polite people as we've been previously. He has a right to be heard whether you like it or not, and I do think frequently he is stopped from speaking. So I think we need to open up and be willing to listen to people's views, and if they're recorded, they're recorded. I don't see why he should be confined to Tuesday morning. And Duncan is a disruptor, and we all get upset about that. But the reality is I don't think it's an unreasonable request to ask to be held or to be heard about something you have a passionate view about. So I think he's been forced into this position. I don't agree with it. I don't approve of it. But he doesn't just have to talk at a Tuesday morning group. So I'm sorry, but that is the way I feel.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Your Worship. Given that we don't actually have anybody in the public forum today, I don't see why Councillor Campbell can't have the opportunity to speak. I do feel that he does miss out on opportunities to speak sometimes, and he has been forced into this position where he needs to speak in this particular forum so that it can be recorded. And I think that, as Christine was saying, it is his view. It's not a council view, it's Duncan's view. So if he wants to say it, he is still a member of the public despite being an elected member, so I don't see why he can't speak in this.
Are there any others that wish to comment on the comments we made and the motion? Councillor Westerman.
Only to say, I think if you went back on some of the recordings or sat through some of the meetings that weren't recorded, the one voice that I hear continually, repetitively, is Councillor Campbell's. So I think he has had numerous and many opportunities. But that aside, I'm just confused that Councillor Campbell's, is he doing this to promote his business on traffic engineering? Because if that's going to be the open forum and we're allowed to do public matters, I think there'll be a few of us sitting around the table who'd like to promote our businesses in a public session in front of councillors.
Well, the answer to that is no.
Are there any other councillors that wish to comment? That being the case, there is a motion.
Sorry, I do wish to comment. Right, I'm putting myself in the shoes of Councillor Campbell. If I was in the position where I felt that I had a kaupapa that I was truly passionate about, that I could not raise in any other forum, and that I was in this position where my only option was to present in the public forum, I would request to be heard. And I would feel like if I wasn't heard, I was being shut down. So I can get that view, Duncan. I get that view. I see where you're coming from. My only concern is that if we allow this to happen, we're going to open a can of worms, and we're going to see a repeat of what happened last triennium, where we heard the constant repetitive views, we heard criticism against elected members, against our staff. And so I suppose I agree with Christine in this instance. I'm open-minded, but if we look at the standing orders, 15.2, any of those points underneath the restrictions, if the speaker's repeating views presented by an earlier speaker, if the speaker's criticising elected members or staff, speakers being repetitive, if it's a matter that you've previously spoken on, if it's subject to legal proceedings, I'd cut it immediately. But I am open-minded and I hear your views. Duncan, thanks.
Yeah, through the chair, just any of those reasons you've outlined that would be a reason not to be hearing people are absolutely within the discretion of the chairperson to cut off and terminate a presentation. So just like any member of the public.
Any other comments from councillors? There is.
Just, yeah, above those clauses, clause 15 of standing orders, it particularly outlines for the purpose of public input and designed for members of the public to be heard by councillors. And I don't feel like, I feel like you've got every opportunity for us to hear you in other situations. And I'd request that we can hear what you've got to say in a time that's just us.
Thank you, Councillor Delator. We have offered other alternative venues at which we could achieve that. We have a motion on the table. We'll put it to the vote, one way or the other. All those in favour say aye. Maybe we can have a show of hands, can we? to hold your hands up, guys. In favour of the motion.
Do you want to read the motion?
Okay, we'll read the motion. That council does not proceed with the public forum and therefore does not allow Councillor Campbell to speak as he is not a member of the public for the purpose of this meeting. So everyone can hold their hands up if they agree with that motion. Those against? Are you not voting, Duncan? Sorry. Councillor Greenslade.
She voted on the other one.
Okay.
I missed that. Apologies. Yeah, so I've got the against, yeah. All good.
Thank you. We've got all those.
Through the chair, I would like to see Councillor Campbell have another opportunity to present to us, though. I just don't think this is the proper forum, but I would like to hear what he's got to say.
Well, through the chair, I'd just like to, you've absolutely proven my point. Members of the public, and I actually am a member of the public, even though I'm a councillor, have greater freedom of expression in the council chambers. You've just absolutely proven my point. And the last term was a fop. I'm hoping this isn't going to be a fop like the last term, but this is greatly discouraging my optimism.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Well, the motion is carried. So we now move on to item 5.2, submissions on the Planning Bill and Natural Environment Bill. Good afternoon, Erin, Hilary and Crystal.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. I think this is the first time our team has presented to this new council, so there's a couple of you who don't know us, so I'll introduce. I'm Erin. I am the team leader of the Resource Management and Reserve Planning part of the policy team, so we look after the district plan, reserve management plans and spatial plans.
Kia ora koutou Council, my name's Hilary Samuel, primarily looking after the district plan within Erin's team.
Kia ora, my name's Crystal, and I work with Hilary on the district plan.
So you will see the paper in front of you. I'm going to take it as read. We're here to talk about the Planning and Natural Environment Bills, which are replacing the Resource Management Act. The paper explains some of the key features of the new planning bills, but the submission points out a couple of areas that affect Taupō directly. We haven't obviously focused on all the high-level stuff, which there's a lot, and Taituara local government body will put that in their submission. So I guess just to start off with is, unfortunately, the bills were released just before Christmas, which is when we went on our Christmas close-down break, like lots of other pieces of legislation that are being proposed by government. So there hasn't been a lot of time for us to go through the bills with any real detail, and also unfortunately we haven't been able to workshop it with you. We also haven't been able to meet with our JMA partners. We haven't been able to discuss and debate with staff. So it's really unfortunate timing. Again, we're relying heavily on Taituara to talk to the government about that, about timing of some of this legislation that's coming through. The other thing that's missing is through the planning bills and the natural environment bills, they're going to have national policy direction, and that will set the framework of how this will be implemented. We don't have that yet. So that's proposed to come out after the acts come in force, so end of this year and then next year. So it's really hard to understand how the new bills will operate in practice because we don't have national direction. So that's tricky as well. So just keep that in mind. So the two key areas of our submission relate to the regulatory relief and retail distribution. I won't talk too much about them, but regulatory relief, just so you understand, it's a new regime that's being proposed through the planning bill. And this would see if a landowner has planning controls on their land that significantly affect the use of that land, then us as a council have to provide regulatory relief. And that relief can be through rates relief, land swap, grants or bonuses. It does not set out how we would pay for that, and given we're moving into this rates cap environment, it's actually quite a large regulatory burden on council if we were to have to implement this. So ourselves and Taupō and others are suggesting to the government that it's probably not a great idea at the moment to put that new regime in place. And then the other parts of the bill, we support standardised planning. We understand that having nationally consistent planning rules is a really good idea. We do have some concerns that the new national policy direction is being developed at pace, and we've asked the government to consider working with local government planning experts who've got the expertise to help them develop that direction. So that we've suggested that in our submission too. I'm going to get Crystal to talk just quickly about the transition, because there's going to be a bit of time between when we have new land use plan that's going to replace our district plan. We've got probably 3 years of this transitional phase where we've got what they're calling a transition regime in place. So I'll just get Crystal to talk about that.
So the transition to the new system should be fully implemented in 2029. So the end of 2029 will move from the RMA to the new system. Key milestones for us as a council will be September 2027, when we will have input into the development of a regional spatial plan. Taupō will become part of a chapter of a regional plan. And then following on from the regional spatial plan, our district plan will move into a land use plan format. We should start work on that in 2028. 2027 to 2028, and they will be notified and adopted in December 2029. So that's the period of change for the district plan. It's a little bit different for resource consenting. So our community will continue to develop and apply for resource consents under our operative district plan. However, the new legislation introduces some transitional provisions, and what that does significantly is narrow the scope for our resource consents planners to consider applications. So whilst our plan will continue to be operative, the range of matters that we can consider as a council will be significantly reduced. So things like amenity, impacts on landscape, views from private property, things that we usually consider will be removed from our discretion. Also, when determining who is affected by a proposal, the scope to do that will also be limited too. So council will no longer be able to look at special circumstances. So we're likely to see a relaxation in the resource consent space, and that will be in effect 1 month after royal assent. So we're looking August, just after mid-2026, all going to plan. As Erin said, we've got these new pieces of legislation, but they just set in place a framework for national direction. So we'll start to see that roll out over the next 3 years. The first suite will focus on regional spatial matters and national direction, and that will be towards the end of 2027. And then the second suite thereafter will introduce some standards that affect our land use plan. So that's the timing of things.
Any questions?
I wouldn't walk away just yet, but thank you for the work you put in there, the three of you, particularly over the Christmas break. It's well done on that. Are there any questions from the councillors? Is this Councillor Greenslade?
I have to say this was quite overwhelming, reading it and listening to you talking. It's even more overwhelming. The only comment that I would make is on page 18, where I saw the goals all listed down, and there's a really great sentence at the bottom of that which says there is no hierarchy of goals. Decision makers must seek to achieve the goals, all of them equally at the same time. Sort of a question, sort of a comment. Yes, big lot of work.
I don't know if it's clear that they all have to be achieved at the same time. I'm not.
I think if the goals are relevant to the situation at hand, then you consider those goals and you consider them equally without hierarchy within them.
Sorry, just to add to that, the government will provide some guidance where there is conflict between the goals and how you balance that conflict, and that will come out with the national direction later this year.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of comments. Look, I have to say that my own impression of any changes to the consenting process, the RMA regime, can be secondary to the manner it gets applied. Look, in my own profession of transport engineering, I've been involved in resource consent process for around 30 years. Same RMA as back then, but a great shift in the way councils in general have become much more of a hindrance than the help they used to be. For example, I think of a time when council officers had to find some very good reasons to justify to their management why they were going to decline an application. Now the situation seems to have flipped 180 degrees so that the applicant has to justify why they deserve to be approved. Now that may sound like a subtle difference, but it is not. Our submission mentions some trepidation about the retail distribution effects, and that we could end up with large box stores or malls in the suburbs, and the Taupō town centre will die just like places like Rotorua I've heard mentioned. Look, I had never quite understood for Taupō that was a concerted policy of the planners, or the district plan anyway, just that the politics of Taupō made it too difficult to happen. So if I'm right to assume about the politics of Taupō being the main bottleneck, things won't change anyway.
Through the chair, just a clarification on the retail distribution. It is a policy within our planning framework. It is directed both through TD 2050 and then through to our district plan, and primarily was derived when the ETA was under construction and there was a large amount of land outside of our existing urban area that was obviously prime for development. And so there was quite a risk at that point that a secondary town centre could be developed outside of Taupō town, and therefore that placing the existing town centre under significant pressure. So that was a deliberate policy approach from the council and has been carried through our plans.
No.
Oh, yeah, I just refer back. Yes, sorry. Yes, my misunderstanding of that. But I still refer back to my first point about council attitudes to applications, and they can either be a help or a hindrance. And I'm just saying, whatever happens with the RMA, if the politics of the place does not want a mall going out Whare-Waka, then it will be made quite difficult for them. That's my take.
Councillor Foreman.
I think Wahine was next.
Councillor Murch.
Yeah, thank you for all of this, Mahi. I think I just want to draw our attention to page 27 under Te Tiriti or Waitangi settlement obligations here. I'm just a little bit, what's the word? Maybe concerned that we are making statements about the Te Tiriti or Waitangi settlement obligations that are proposed through these legislative changes when, due to the timing, we've already identified that we haven't actually engaged with our iwi partners, and therefore, I think there's just a potential there for council to be seen as having a position on a specific topic like Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the settlement obligations that could, be controversial or on the other end of the spectrum in comparison to what our treaty partners or our JMA partners might think. And so we're at the end of the statement there, we make a position and we say that we support the intent behind the design of the planning system to actively engage in iwi authorities in the development of higher order planning documents, higher order being the key word here. Now, from the perspective of our iwi partners, I can't speak for them. However, my own personal view is that those two key words, higher order planning documents, te rapia, which means maybe, our iwi don't want to be, our iwi might want to be involved in everything from inception right through to higher order planning and not just be limited to that higher order planning document. So I think I'm just a little bit concerned around making a position statement in that sense of Te Tiriti o Waitangi settlement obligations when we don't know what the intentions of our JMA partners, iwi partners are on that.
Happy to amend the submission if council are requesting an amendment.
Could I suggest, if we were going to amend it, one option might be to fully acknowledge in our submission that owing to the timing of the submission process, we haven't been able to engage in the way that we would normally. However, this is our position. That's as open as a suggestion.
Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, I'll back that as well if you could include that. But there was I'm a little bit confused because there's so much detail in here, around how these changes do impact the community's ability to actually engage in the processes that are coming. Because in some cases it seems like it would enable the community to some point, and in others it's actually going to lock them out. So
I'll make a comment and you guys jump in if you want to. Yes, there's going to be a lot more nationally standardised. Sorry, is that working?
Yep.
Oh, okay. There's going to be a lot more nationally standardised planning standards. So there'll be templated plans coming out where, for example, you might be told these are the 5 zones you're allowed to use in your land use plan. If you were to go outside of those national provisions and do something bespoke for an area, for example, like Kinloch, you would have to justify that. And that's when the community can get involved. But when it's a standardised provision, there's no ability for the community to have a say or be consulted on, because it won't be consulted on. It's just, it is what it is. It's a provision.
And it'll be a little bit the same for resource consents, in that there will be likely more, without having seen the details obviously, there are likely to be more permitted activities where usually a consent might come through our council right now and it'll reach a certain threshold, and that would trigger the need for either affected parties or a wider notification. There will be likely to be less of those situations. So in those situations, the affected parties or just the general public will have less ability to input into that specific development through a resource consent process.
So I know you don't have the details right now, but knowing the variation across our district, I'll say variation, do you believe these standards that are coming in or proposed will see our communities worse off or just about the same? Can you answer that?
Probably depends on which side of the fence you're on. It'll definitely be easier to undertake development. It remains to be seen how some of the effects of that development will be managed under the new regime.
Councillor Greenslade, could I just ask people, when you ask your question, if you turn the microphone off, as we are getting feedback through the speakers. Councillor Greenslade.
Thank you, Your Worship. Local government professionals are doing their own submission. You've commented here that you didn't have an opportunity to read it before you made your own submissions. Have you had the opportunity to read it? And has there anything in their submission that's relevant to ours? Add, take away, you know the question.
Yes, it actually came through a couple of days ago. It's 101 pages long. So I got Copilot to review it. And the summary was, it's very much covered off what we were saying around the timing of the legislation, the implementation of the legislation, and those timeframes they put in place to get the first regional spatial plan out in something like 15 months, which seems fairly unrealistic given the size of our region. We have to set up regional spatial planning committees, which council will be represented on. There's a whole lot more things to happen before we can produce a plan, and so we think that's unrealistic. Taupō, I've talked a lot about that. The treaty settlement and obligations to Māori was covered off a lot as well. The regulatory relief, to quote what Taupō said about regulatory relief, it's conceptually unclear, legally risky, and practically unworkable. So yes, I've had a look to review. Nothing more that we would probably add to our submission. It's not Taupō specific. It's Yes.
Councillor Woodward.
Is it Duncan? Or me?
No, you.
Thank you. I just want to appreciate the team for what they've had to get through over that break. I can see there's a lot of work that's been done and had to have been done, and for us to be considering this is quite difficult, so I can't imagine what it's been like for you guys. We did have a pretty good discussion on Tuesday morning, I think it was, in regards to this, and I think the only sort of other question I really have, a little bit following on from what Wahine was saying, was I understand the timeframes were quite short, absolutely, with the submission time, but so no collaboration with iwi was had, but has there been an opportunity to at least review each other's submissions to see if they align?
Yes, so I shared our draft submission with the Trust Board. I haven't with Ruakawa or Tarrant at this point. And I had an informal meeting with officers of the Trust Board as well this week, and they're expecting their draft to be hopefully ready by today or tomorrow. Oh no, it won't be tomorrow now, but today, possibly next week. Very much similar situation to us. It's been a real rush trying to get things done over Christmas. But we definitely, at the officer level, work quite closely with the Trust Board. Yeah.
Councillor Campbell.
Look, for the record, my request last meeting to remove politically charged interpretation from embedded council agenda templates has not been actioned, and I'm talking about the statements about obligations to Te Reti Waitangi and acknowledging partnership and its basis, and I do not accept that a notice of motion, as was indicated at the time by Your Worship, the Mayor, is the appropriate or required mechanism to raise that issue, or even one that should be subject to debate. So I respectfully disagree with that ruling and ask that my objection be noted. This week I'll also be forwarding my suggested revision of the wording in the templates to remove the political bias.
What was the question?
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just following on, sorry, just because I'm new, newly elected, when a council is given, work like this, legislation like this, and it's come in as quickly as it has, what opportunity does local government have to push back against central and their timeframes?
This is it. I'm not sure if Julie would like to answer that. But
None. I mean, we do advocate, so we do meet in terms of groups of councils through mayoral forums and changes like that. But this is the process.
Councillor Cameron.
I have some pretty serious concerns about the retail distribution effects not being included in scope. It's so incredibly vital for our town centre that we protect that at all costs, really. We don't want another situation like Rotorua. do you feel the wording is strong enough given the importance of it to our particular township?
Thank you. So it's kind of it's the reverse way round in that at the moment the planning bill excludes retail distribution effects as something that we can manage. So we're asking for that to be deleted. So then effectively it's gone. However, they have to accept that submission. Our risk to the retail distribution effects is lower than it was in the past when we had large tracts of open land out away from the town centre. However, there are still rules in our plan which set up how our town centre functions and the office and retail that can locate outside of that. So it's kind of at a smaller scale than perhaps the risks are at a smaller scale than perhaps a large format retail town centre, which we were previously worried about. So I still think it is a relevant risk that we need to be concerned about, and I do think that if it was removed from that list, then we'd be fine. But
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question, conscious of the timing of the agenda item coming out and the draft submission, and we spoke at length about this on Tuesday, and without track changes on here, can you confirm that the feedback we've provided is either in the agenda item we've got here or will be in the one we submit? It is? Perfect, that's all I want to know. Thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, just again, following on from my last question, so I understand that the submission is a way to push back, but has there ever been any instance where local councils have gotten together and collaborated enough to push back on a central decision? Because I do feel these bills that are coming through are very centralised, and it's pushing us as a district into further centralisation.
Great question, Councillor Woodward. I guess that's why we are a member of organisations like LGNZ and a member and represent strongly at mayoral forums and things like that, where there are groups of councils that collaboratively come together to submit and to advocate on behalf of councils.
Councillor Duncan.
You through the chair, yeah. A couple of things. Just LGNZ, I'm not confident are the greatest representatives for us. I know they were. Well, as far as I can piece together, some years ago, I don't know how many years ago, they were sort of granted privileged access to central government more than your average council, but I greatly feel they have not served us well anyway. But I was just going to make a comment about the retail distribution thing again. I mean, it seems to be a presumption around here that if a big mall goes out in Whareawaka, that's kind of the end of the town centre. And I mean, there's examples thrown around there like Rotorua and I think Tauranga has probably been used before. I'm just not 100% convinced that's always the case, to be honest. I mean, in every instance, a provincial place like this, you get a mall that kills the town centre. I mean, seems reasonable to assume, but have we? I suppose I would like, for my own better understanding of that, to see a bunch of case studies to prove that point that that's always what happens. That's my question.
Well, I'm happy to provide the evidence that we used through the Environment Court, which justified the plan changes that went through to put
Through the chair, I'll just clarify. My point is that I think we should have the say over that. We should have the ability to influence that. And right now it's out of scope. So, yeah, perhaps we do want to have a mall out that way. But if we don't, we haven't got the ability to manage that under this legislation. I think we're probably the best people to decide whether or not we would like to have a mall in our CBD, rather than that decision being made regionally or centrally.
Are there any further questions of the team? If not, we've got a motion in front of us here. The council approves.
Through the chair, through the mayor. We might need to just amend that a little bit to include. I've got it here. seeking delegation from the Chief Executive to approve final edits and then submit, because we've got the additional edit under the settlement section.
So I was going to suggest that we go approve the submission subject to the inclusion of items, or subject to the inclusion of the discussion from today, approves the submission. So subject to the amendments requested today. Thank you.
I'm happy to move that, Your Worship. Happy to move.
So we got the amended motion on the screen there. Council approves the submission on the planning bill and the Natural Environment Bill, subject to the inclusion of the amendments requested at the meeting. We have a mover, Councillor Taylor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Foreman. Put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you for that. On to item 5.3, recommendations for the Risk and Assurance Committee.
Kia ora, I'm Aidan Smith from our policy team. This is just a for information paper. The background to this is your Risk and Assurance Committee. Last year it identified climate change as a strategic risk. It requested some information to help it assess that risk and what the risks actually were for council and how well prepared we are and what sort of action might be needed. So we provided this report to them and they requested it be forwarded on to council today. So I'm just seeking that you receive the report. That's it.
Councillor, you want something to say?
I did. I was just waiting for you to say my name. Thank you, Aidan. I was on the Emergency Management Committee in the previous triennium, and that is now defunct. Presumably the process that we would go through is now undertaken by the Risk and Assurance Committee. Is that correct?
Correct. The delegations of the Emergency Management Committee were removed to the delegations of the Risk and Assurance Committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. So having read this paper and this report, my comment would be, and probably that is in light of the fact that I was on that Emergency Management Committee, is that I think this report is a little premature. I'm concerned that by giving us all the things that can go wrong in our district, we should have actually had a workshop on what is actually happening in our district and where we are preparing for emergencies across our district. I note that in the executive summary it says 4 key areas where council is significantly exposed to risk is unlikely to meet public expectations. And I think that's a big warning to us as councillors and governance, because I'm not seeing anything in the report that does talk about solutions or funding or timelines. And actually there was nothing in the report that I read that I probably didn't already know about all the risks that we've got across the district. And I'm not going to go into them. You listed them all down very, very clearly. As a Turangi ward councillor, I think the risks are almost greater, according to your report. Fewer alternative routes out of the district, older infrastructure, proximity to waterways and wetlands, all of which are likely to be harder hit in that ward than they are in the Taupō urban ward. And I think that residents particularly have an assumption that council is there to protect us, and yet the report clearly says that council may not live up to community expectations. And so my question to you is, if we accept this report today, what changes for staff and what changes for residents?
The report is essentially a what position are we in at this point in time, it is an assessment of the risk that we currently face. Already through the LTP, we've identified a number of the risks, and we do have plans in place to address them. You've put funding aside, for example, for stormwater improvement works to identify risk areas, including in Turangi. So there are funding programs and improvement plans in place, most of which are documented in the report. It does focus on the risks that are outstanding and a bit of divergence, particularly between what people might expect and what is realistically achievable from council infrastructure. Most of these are not a function of what we could do. They're a function of what we have and how that will live up in what are rare events, or in stormwater, the fact that our service level is not for the very rare events, it's for the day-to-day events. So the expectation that it will be the right size for those big events is probably beyond what was ever intended. So there is definitely a bit of a communication piece potentially with the public, maybe through the next long-term plan. Again, improving these sort of level of service questions in a rates cap environment might also be really challenging if money was the problem. And in some of these cases, it's sort of inherent to the risks of the infrastructure. There are also a lot of positives in the report that might not come through. We've been planning well for the last 20 years. We've not been building in the wrong places. We're lucky with our stormwater gullies, particularly here in Taupō. Our new developments are well designed for 1 in 100-year events. And if you compare probably the outcome of this risk assessment to other parts of the country, we're probably quite lucky. We're insulated from some of the worst risks. So it's not completely negative. There's positive things that council are doing that are in the report too. But this will form a basis for some of the conversations in the long-term plan. And one of the reasons we did this is Audit New Zealand have signalled that this will be a high focus area for them to look at through the long-term plan. How are we prepared? Do we understand the risks, and are we adequately prepared?
And can I say that? And thank you very much for that, Aidan, and thank you for focusing on the positive. And I appreciate your comment about communication, because I do think, and as councillors, I think we all appreciate this, that there is an expectation that council will be there to help us in the unlikely or likely event. I've just noticed your comment about 1 in 100-year event. I have heard NIWA saying, stop using those terms, stop using unprecedented. They are part of our life now, and we are not to go on using those terms, because it creates a feeling that actually we're sort of somehow immune from these things, and we are not. So a communication, I think, going forward. And I was privileged to be on that Emergency Management Committee meeting and was able to hear some of the things that were being done across the district. But you're right, communication is going to be the key going forward.
Councillor Woodward, you are next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Aidan, for this presentation. I do just have a quick couple of questions here, and I really appreciate the work that has been done on this paper. It certainly highlights quite a few things that we need to be aware of, and no, not all negative, but it certainly does highlight some issues. So I just wondered what steps, because a lot of this, what's in here, highlights an issue, particularly around flooding. And flooding is a major issue that we're seeing around the country at the moment. But what steps can we as a council take to address root causes that cause the flooding to actually happen, like reduced land absorption from historical farming and forestry, so we can prevent these risks rather than just react? I do feel this paper is quite reactive and not proactive.
We are probably in the early stages of some of that. We do have high-level flood mapping, which is reasonably conservative, and it was for the purposes of identifying what could be done to reduce potential risk areas. Mm-hmm. And there is a program of works to identify some of those. For example, Mankakino is one area where there is higher farmland behind that could run into the town. That was identified as a risk area for investment. Money was put aside. Our stormwater team have been in there looking at it. I think they've found that the flood mapping was probably too conservative, and maybe the problem's not as big as it should be. But certainly there's money set aside to explore the high-level risk areas that have been identified, and we just need to work through those as they come. There's also money put aside to improving that flood mapping so that it is more realistic, and potentially it could become public and shared with the public, so that it would provide a better information basis to people understand what they might face themselves.
Right, thank you. My question though wasn't so much on where is the flooding, but what can we do to help the flooding not happen? Because flooding has been happening because we've been farming and forestering on our lands for too long, so the land now does not know how to absorb the water enough, so it runs off. So it's how can we use natural solutions for these risks like erosions and flooding, things like by way of planting deep-rooted species to rebuild the soil and prevent erosion, etc. We could also encourage community in this initiative as well to take pressure off council.
The only answer I'll give to that is that the focus of the report is largely on council services and infrastructure. It's limited to our clear roles and responsibilities. And it's not especially focused on the impact on the public, but more what are the impacts to our infrastructure and services to limit the scope. We didn't get into ecological impacts, wider environmental impacts, economic impacts. You could take this very far, but this is our starting point, looking at what are the specific impacts to council and what plans do we have in place to manage those.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Sorry, just one more question here. So just going on from what you were saying before about Mangakino and actually what you were just mentioning about council assets, but in the spirit of kaitiakitanga and ensuring we protect all of our communities, I do notice that the lakes in my ward, Mangakino Pauakani, like Maratai and Whakamaru, aren't specifically mentioned in this paper. I understand the focus is on council's direct assets like water intakes primarily from Lake Taupō, but given the climate-related pressures mentioned in the review with the algal bloom worsening by warmer periods and heavy rain causing runoff, how can we better support all areas of our district, and why is this risk being considered for that area as well?
Yes, I think you're right, those are risks, but they haven't been explored as part of this paper just because of the narrow scope.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, just a couple of my comments / observations and a question at the end about a little detail in the paper actually. Look, apart from the ski industry and perhaps your brush fire, I do believe that colder climates present greater challenges for this district than warm, and that's just a reflection on human habitation globally, which has always flourished more easily in warmer climates. And I do know enough about climatology that things will get colder sooner or later, perhaps quite sooner than we think. So when that happens, it will present a much greater challenge, the ski industry accepted. Look, we have been presented with some extrapolations of future flooding, but I do have to admit a degree of scepticism because of two things really. First is our blessing of free draining volcanic soils, which is also a curse for farming. And second, we have about the mildest weather in the whole of the North Island. And as someone who likes a nice storm every now and then, I do miss the more exciting stuff we get on the coast. But my question really, on page 6, you've got a diagram, and we're foreseeing, unless maybe I didn't read it correctly, no increase in annual rainfall or heavy rain days. That sounds quite reassuring. But is that your prediction, or am I reading that wrong?
Just be clear, none of these are my predictions. I've used government sources, regional sources, national NGOs, right? All the sources are in the material.
Well, no, but if we've got... Oh, yeah, sorry, go
You're
on.
correct, that is exactly what it shows. Relative to other parts of the nation, we're reasonably unscathed by climate change.
What's to worry about then?
We can expect more intense events, more frequent heavy rainfall,
but
not a greater number of them, not a greater total number of rain. So we get it all at once. But the same amount for the year.
But no increase in annual rainfall because that's
right.
So we just get.
So you get a year's worth of rain in one day, and then.
Is that what I mean? Yeah.
That's exactly what it means.
I get it.
So we can certainly. They're telling us we can certainly expect more intense, heavy rainfall events.
But less
that
rainy
risk
days.
Has increased.
Less rainy days. Oh, that's better then.
That's what the projections suggest. Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Enoch.
Thank you, Aidan, for this presentation. Can I just clarify that this is a description of where we sit at the moment as we're required by audit and under the Local Government Act, under our directives in regards to climate risk?
That's right. This is essentially assessment of the risk of the status quo, but also taking into account what we currently do to manage and mitigate that risk.
And what's under our jurisdiction as
Yes.
a district council. Thank you very much. I'd like to move the recommendation go forward.
Councillor Merch.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to kind of allude to that as well, but Aidan, thank you for this work. I think it is a very well written paper, and I appreciate all of the detail that's gone into it. And I guess just in the sense of it being our baseline starter, you know, we could always move to, in the future, expand on it. We could look at what others are doing within our district, like our iwi, because climate change is different in different worldviews and different aspects, right? And we can always look and see what the likes of iwi, the likes of the bigger organisations are doing in terms of climate change, as well as that being actually the number one hot topic of the National Iwi Chairs Forum that spoke at Waitangi the other day. So I think for us, Council, as a starting point, it's bang on, and I just want to thank you for your work.
Councillor Foreman.
Hey, finally. Yeah, I take this as a noting paper, so this is probably more of a comment for us as council. That in the paper, I did want to point out that, you know, the top flooding areas for the low-lying roads are Korohe, Waiotaka, Grace Road, and Awemate. So when we're thinking about roading projects, I just want us to keep that in mind, that that severely impacts Turangi.
Councillor Greenslade.
Could you please tell the author of this paper to go back and correct the spelling of Motuopa, which is spelled incorrectly throughout the whole report?
I'll definitely pass that on.
Thank you, Councillor Greenslade. Obviously, your term as a teacher comes to the fore frequently. Are there any other comments? Councillor Leonard, did you move the motion we have on the screen? Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mertz, seconder. Put it to vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you for that. On to item 5.4 now. Council appointments, training and conference opportunities. I invite Karen Watts to speak to the members.
Kia ora. So just after we produced the agenda item, I understand that Councillor Greenslade can no longer go to Zone 2, so that's why she's crossed out on your screens. And we've had 2 other councillors express interest in going, and of course I can add anybody else now if they want to as well. It's up in Lake Karapiro on the 27th of March.
Well, through the chair, I do have a question. Because it's my understanding, certainly in the past, last term, if we want to go to a Zone 2 meeting, usually up in Karapiro or Hamilton, and we're already members of LGNZ, we don't have to get permission of everyone else to go. We just go and then claim back the petrol. That's what happened all last term. So has something changed?
No, nothing's changed. It's just that now we are recording your expenses and putting them on the website. It's just for things like your mileage and that, just so that it's kind of got a loop back and that audit trail of attendance at these kinds of things.
Well, no, it's just that it's related to, like, I emailed you about it. I don't actually want to go to that one, but I might decide to go. But I might decide to go. I usually don't decide until the week or so before. So it's like having to get a month in advance permission to go. I don't want to have to do that. It seems silly, and I'm not sure why we're going through this.
Apologies, Councillor Campbell. It is actually something that we do need to do. It is an area where we have had scrutiny from auditors. So I apologise that this is a process we need to follow, but we do need to do it from a sensitive expenditure perspective.
Well, okay, in that case, yeah, put my name down in advance for all of the zone meetings for the next 3 years, and I'll turn up if I feel like it. Is that all right to do that? Can I just do that?
Not
Blanket permission, please.
Well, it's not permission. It's not necessarily because it links back to your mileage expenditure.
Well, no, but we've got to vote on this, so it is getting permission, really, because if a majority don't want me to go, then I can't go, from the sounds of it.
Councillor Campbell.
Well,
you were
why are
only
we voting on it then?
Your position was to be reviewed in 12 months.
Just take it for granted and report in each month.
Right, we have an amended motion on the screens in front of us. Would someone like
to be added? I thought I had ticked the yes box in the meeting invite.
You are so headed. Someone like to move that motion for me? What? We'll make Councillor Woodward move the motion. Can we have a seconder? Councillor. Sorry, getting you two mixed up. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. We're now moving into the confidential section, so we'll take a 10-minute break and respectfully have to ask the public. Oh, sorry, we have to move into a confidential section. Can we have a mover for that? Councillor Cameron, seconder Councillor Murch. We need to have a vote on it. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no.